The notification popped up on my phone just as I was gazing out at the New York skyline from my office window. Another royalty payment received. The amount was bold on the screen, enough to make most people's jaw drop. For me, it was simply routine. I set the phone down on my glass desk, smoothing the sleeve of my ivory silk blouse, and allowed myself a small, ironic smile. Because the name attached to that payment, Henderson and Company, was one I would never forget. The hum of the city was faint through the glass, the air inside laced with fresh coffee and faint traces of leather from the executive chair I sat in. My office stretched wide, lined with art from independent designers whose careers had blossomed because of my platform. Each piece a reminder of why I had started and how far I'd come. Yet behind the polish and calm composure, there was a storm that never fully quieted. I remembered standing in their boardroom years ago, nervous and hopeful, clutching my first business proposal with both hands. They hadn't just said no. They had laughed, dismissed me like I was a child with a daydream too fragile for the real world. Now, every time their company made a sale, they wired me money. Not charity. Not a gift. Royalties. My terms. I picked up the phone again, letting my thumb trace the glowing numbers. Well, I whispered, a hint of steel in my voice. Poetic justice looks good in my bank account. The memory is still sharp, like a paper cut that never healed. I was 24, clutching my laptop as I rode the elevator to the 23rd floor of Henderson and Company's glass tower. My proposal was everything to me. Weeks of research, nights without sleep, a vision I believed could change how independent designers connected with businesses. My chest was tight, but hope carried me through those chrome doors. The conference room was polished and cold. Men in tailored suits sat around a long oak table, their pens clicking, their eyes already glazed over before I even began. "All right, Miss Walker," Henderson said, leaning back with that air of casual superiority. "Show us what you've got." I swallowed hard, launched my slides, and started to explain. My voice trembled at first, but grew steadier as I spoke. I talked about scalability, partnerships, royalties, a system that benefited both designers and companies. It was bold, yes, but it was solid. Halfway through, one of the younger execs smirked. "Ambitious," he muttered under his breath. Another whispered, "Unrealistic." My palms grew slick, but I pushed on, clinging to the belief that one of them might understand. Then Henderson delivered the final blow. "This is cute," he said, lips curling. "But business isn't built on idealism, Miss Walker. Maybe when you've lived a little longer, you'll understand how the real world works." The words knocked the air out of me. My throat tightened. I wanted to argue, to defend what I had poured myself into, but their eyes had already moved past me to the next agenda item. I was invisible. I walked out with my laptop pressed to my chest, the city blurring around me as hot tears threatened to spill. That night, in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, I collapsed on the floor, knees to my chest, the sting of humiliation burning deeper than I could bear. It was my grandmother, Eleanor, who found me there. She sat beside me, her presence calm, grounding, and pressed something cool into my palm, a small silver keychain she'd carried for years. "Emily," she said softly, her voice steady with wisdom, "a no is only fuel for the yes you'll build yourself. Don't you ever forget that." I stared at the keychain, fingers curling around it, her words weaving into my bones. That night, I made a vow. If they wouldn't open the door for me, I would build my own. And I swore never to need their approval again. The morning after that vow, I woke up with puffy eyes and a restless heart. Henderson's smirk haunted me, but so did my grandmother's words. I wrapped my fingers around the silver keychain, its weight steady in my palm, and whispered, "I'll show them." I didn't have capital, connections, or a polished office. What I had was grit, and a secondhand laptop that overheated after 30 minutes. I worked late nights after my day job at a boutique marketing firm, teaching myself coding from free tutorials, sketching wireframes on printer paper when my brain was too fried to stare at the screen. My tiny apartment became both prison and sanctuary. The wallpaper peeled, the radiator hissed, but the walls bloomed with neon sticky notes. Growth. Clients. Royalties. They weren't just reminders. They were my lifeline. The first version of my platform was clumsy, buggy, embarrassing. But I pushed it live anyway. A handful of scrappy small businesses signed up, people as hungry as I was. When one boutique owner emailed me, thanking me for saving them time and money, I printed the email and taped it above my desk. Proof that I wasn't crazy. The grind was brutal. Some nights, I ate cereal for dinner because every spare dollar went to server fees. My friends were getting promotions, posting about salary raises, while I sat at 3 a.m. debugging code with chipped nail polish and trembling faith. Loneliness wrapped around me tighter than my worn-out blanket. But cracks of light broke through. A local craft fair used my platform, connecting vendors in record time. Then a small magazine mentioned it in a half-page feature. The traffic doubled overnight. I cried that night, not from despair this time, but from possibility. Then came Linda Carter. She was a venture capitalist, sharp-eyed and seasoned, who stumbled onto my site. She scheduled a call, and I nearly dropped my phone when I saw her name in my inbox. "Kid," she said after listening to my pitch, her voice raspy and direct, "you've got fire. Don't waste your energy proving those men wrong. Build something so strong they'll beg to be part of it." Linda became my mentor. She tore apart my business plan, forced me to defend every number, pushed me to negotiate harder than I thought possible. She didn't coddle me. She believed in me, which was fiercer than any comfort. With her guidance, I restructured, refined, relaunched. And slowly, the numbers climbed. 10 clients, 50, 100. Payments trickled in, then poured. For the first time, I paid my rent entirely from my company's account. That feeling? Better than champagne. But I didn't flaunt it. To the outside world, I was just freelancing. I kept my victories quiet, building in shadows. Let them think I was small. Let them underestimate me. Because behind the curtain, I was building something massive. And the irony? Within a few years, companies like Henderson and Company, the very ones who once called me naive, signed contracts to use my platform. Each agreement came with a clause I insisted on: royalties. Every quarter, their payments flowed into my account, funding not only my life but my independence. They had no idea the girl they once dismissed was now the woman pulling strings behind their profits. And soon they'd find out. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when my assistant, Claire, slipped into my office, clutching a navy blue folder to her chest. Her expression was careful, the kind she wore when she wasn't sure if the news she carried was good or bad. "They're here," she said quietly. I looked up from my laptop. "Who's here?" She hesitated. "Henderson and Company. They requested an in-person meeting. Urgent." For a moment, the air in the room thickened. That name, so sharp, so familiar, was like an old scar brushed by careless fingers. I leaned back in my chair, smoothing the lapel of my blazer, as if the gesture could hide the sudden rush in my chest. "Send them in," I said evenly. The door opened and 3 men walked in. Older now, grayer at the temples, but unmistakably the same. Henderson led, his once commanding stride carrying a trace of hesitation. Their eyes roamed the space, taking in every detail: the floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Manhattan skyline, the sleek glass table, the walls adorned with abstract art from designers who had built their careers through my platform. And then, of course, the framed contracts on display. Agreements bearing their own company's name, each one a reminder of who held the reins now. "Emily Walker," Henderson said, his smile tight, almost forced. He extended his hand. "It's been a long time." I rose smoothly, shaking his hand with the firm confidence I didn't have the last time we met. "It has," I replied. We settled around the glass table. Henderson cleared his throat and slid the folder across to me. "We'll get straight to the point. Your platform has become indispensable to our firm. We rely on it heavily now. We'd like to discuss renewing our licensing contract, perhaps under new terms." I glanced at the folder, but didn't touch it. Instead, I leaned back, crossing my legs with deliberate calm. New terms, I echoed. Interesting. I seem to recall a time when you weren't interested in terms at all. A flicker crossed Henderson's face. One of the junior execs shifted uncomfortably. Business is unpredictable, Henderson said finally. We couldn't have known how far you'd take this. I tilted my head, a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. No, you couldn't. But I did. Silence stretched. I rose from my chair and walked to the wall, tapping my nail gently against the glass frame of the first contract Henderson's firm ever signed with me. You see this? I said, turning to face them. That's the agreement you signed 2 years ago. Every product you sell, every designer you connect through my platform, you owe me royalties. And every quarter, like clockwork, the payments arrive in my account. Payments that grow larger as your reliance deepens. Henderson shifted in his seat. Yes, well, that's why we're here. We'd like to renegotiate. Perhaps a buyout. I cut him off with a sharp but polite smile. A buyout? No, Mr. Henderson. You don't get to erase history with a check. You refused my proposal when I needed your support. Now, every day your company profits, you pay me royalties. The words landed heavy, filling the room. One of the younger executives glanced at Henderson, panic flickering in his eyes. Henderson's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I returned to my seat, folding my hands neatly on the table. So here we are. You need me. You came to me. That means you don't set the terms anymore. I do. For the first time, Henderson didn't look like the man in control. His shoulders sagged slightly, as though the weight of every decision, past and present, was pressing down on him. And in that moment, I knew the balance of power had shifted forever. The silence in the room felt different now. Not the dismissive silence of years ago, but the heavy pause of men realizing they were no longer in command. I let them sit in it for a moment before speaking. You want renewal, I said slowly.
Fine.
But this time, it won't be on your terms. The younger executives leaned forward, pens poised like obedient schoolboys. Henderson kept his gaze fixed on me, jaw tight, waiting. First, I said, voice firm, royalties remain. Non-negotiable. In fact, they increased by 2%. Call it inflation or call it what it really is, compensation for the years you dismissed me. One of the junior execs started to object, but Henderson lifted a hand, silencing him. Second, I continued, full transparency. No undercutting designers, no burying fees, no cutting corners. Every quarter, your firm will provide me with a detailed report of every transaction tied to my platform. If I find even one violation, the contract ends. And when it ends, so does your access. The younger men scribbled furiously. Henderson's face was unreadable. Third, I leaned forward, allowing a faint smile, mentorship. Henderson and company will fund a women's entrepreneurship program through my foundation. Scholarships, workshops, capital, all under your name but on my terms. Every dollar will remind the world that what you once refused, you now support. I saw Henderson's lips tighten, but he didn't argue. He knew better. And lastly, I said softly, my tone dipping into something more personal, respect. The next young woman who walks into your boardroom with an idea deserves your attention, whether she's ready or not. If I hear otherwise, our deal ends instantly. No negotiations. The words hung in the air, sharper than any contract clause. Henderson's jaw worked as though he was chewing on pride. Finally, he exhaled a long, weary breath. These terms are unusual, he said. I tilted my head. So, was building an empire from scratch. For the first time, his eyes softened. He wasn't looking at me like a competitor anymore. He was looking at me like someone he couldn't ignore.
Fine, he said at last.
We'll agree. The junior executives nodded hurriedly, jotting notes as though afraid the moment might dissolve. I leaned back, satisfaction warm but measured. This wasn't revenge. This was balance. This was rewriting the rules. As they rose to leave, Henderson paused at the door. He turned, meeting my gaze. Emily, you've become someone impossible to underestimate. I held a stare, calm and steady. No, Mr. Henderson. I've always been that someone. You just didn't see it. And with that, he left, the weight of humility clinging to him like a second suit. When the door closed, I let out a slow breath. My pulse was steady, my shoulders light. For years, I had carried the sting of their rejection. Now I carried something else, the certainty that I no longer needed their approval. They needed mine. After they left, I stayed seated for a while, the quiet of the office wrapping around me like a familiar blanket. The city moved on outside my window, cars streaming, horns echoing, lives intertwining in ways unseen. But inside, something within me had shifted. I thought back to the girl I used to be, the one who stood trembling in Henderson's boardroom, clutching her proposal like a lifeline. I remembered the sting of their laughter, the way it carved into me, and the nights I lay awake replaying every word, wondering if I truly was foolish to dream. Yet here I was, not only standing, but thriving. And every corner of my office was proof. The art from rising designers, the framed contracts, the glow of my name etched on the door. It all told a story. My story. On the shelf behind me sat the object I had carried from those darker days, a small silver pen my grandmother gave me, engraved with the words, "Write your own terms." At the time, it felt like a token, a gentle encouragement. Now it was prophecy fulfilled. I rose, taking the pen into my hand, rolling it between my fingers. I had written contracts with it, signed deals, built a future. And now it reminded me that the greatest power wasn't just in earning royalties or winning negotiations. It was in choosing the life I wanted, regardless of who believed in me. The phone buzzed on my desk. Another payment notification. Henderson and Company, right on schedule. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. Some scars never fully fade, but they can become reminders of just how far you've walked. My gaze drifted once more to the skyline, the city bathed in late afternoon light. I thought of the women coming after me, the dreamers, the risk-takers, the ones trembling as I once did. Maybe my path had been scarred, but it was also proof. Proof that dismissal doesn't define you, and rejection can be the very soil where resilience takes root. I placed the silver pen back on its shelf, my voice steady, strong, and laced with the grace I had fought so hard to claim. They refused my business proposal, I whispered into the quiet, and now they pay me royalties.